And as I said, this session is called Getting Ready for Dementia, Housing Cares, and it wouldn't have been possible without the generous support of Housing 21. So Bruce, thanks very much, and the team for your continued support of the HousingLIN. I'm going to hand over to Bruce now. Bruce Moore, who's the Chief Executive of Housing 21, and he's going to introduce the panel and also host the session. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. So, as Jeremy said, I'm Bruce Moore, I'm the Chief Executive of Housing 21. It's a pleasure to be able to chair this important session this morning. The Alzheimer's Society estimate that over 850,000 people in the UK are living with dementia, and that number is obviously increasing as we live longer and the population ages. But housing plays a vital role in helping people live well with dementia, and it's an essential setting that allows for people's autonomy and for any support to be provided. But it's also important that housing that is provided is dementia friendly. And this session explores how housing provision and the providers of housing can get ready for dementia. We're going to hear from Lord Best, who co-chairs the all-party parliamentary group of Housing Care for Older People, who ran the inquiry to consider, are we ready for to house people living with dementia, in the inquiry that started in May 2020 and reported in February this year. And we'll also, a key aspect of that inquiry was listening directly to the views of people living with dementia. And Chris Peach, the Executive Director of Extra Care at Housing 21, will introduce a video so we can hear from a resident living with dementia and their valuable insights. But when you hear from a person living with dementia, you only hear from one person's view, and the experiences and the preferences and the manifestations of the dementia are going to be different. And Yasmin Hussain, the policy executive at Foundations, will pick up on that and provide insights on how diversity and inclusion, how policies can be made more dementia appropriate. And then we're going to hear from Becky Oatley from the University of Worcester, which is certainly a centre of excellence for dementia studies, and provide some research and academic perspectives on what housing and extra care in particular can do to support people living well with dementia. We're also going to be joined by Jane McDermott and possibly Jack Gould as well from Manchester. Jane's heads the Healthy Ageing Research Group at the University of Manchester, and Jack's a project manager at the Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership. And they're launching a report today on examining how the lives of people living with dementia and their carers can be improved by the support that housing can provide. But each speaker is going to speak for about 10 to 15 and maximum 15 minutes. And that's going to allow plenty of opportunities for questions for the speakers. So do post, as Sally said, your questions and answers. And we'll then have a panel session at the end to address those. And that panel session will also be joined by Wendy Wells from Guinness Care. And you know, Guinness was one of the first housing associations to really embrace dementia awareness, to become a dementia-friendly organisation. And Wendy can add some really valuable insights. And hopefully, Candy Worth, who's the Senior Commissioning Lead for Mental Health and Dementia at Somerset Council, will be able to join us. But I know Candy has not been well recently, so we hope she will be able to join us for the panel at that session. But Dementia Friends, the Alzheimer's Society's Dementia Friendly Housing Guide, the all-party parliamentary inquiry into reporting dementia, and the great work of Dementia and Housing Working Group that's held works there, and they've been doing some great work on dementia-friendly housing design and technology information and guidance. The HousingLIN has also a great wealth of resources, and the promise we've had in the social care white paper of Dementia Strategy in 2022. So all these components still need to be brought together to make sure we can get dementia ready. So no more from me. I'm going to pass over to Lord Best, who's going to talk about the APPG's inquiry and set us off on this exploration today. Thank you, Lord Best.
Thanks very much, Bruce. I'm not muted, am I, for once? No, here we go. Well, first, thanks to Bruce, because Housing 21 sponsor the all-party parliamentary group, the APPG, on housing and care for older people. And that's where I come in, because I co-chair that with Peter Aldous MP. And our other partner, who's done a lot of work with us, is, of course, the HousingLIN. And I've got to pay tribute to Jeremy and colleagues. The HousingLIN has become an absolutely central part of networking, holding everybody together, helping us keep up with what's going on out there. If you did nothing else as a result of tuning in today, it's get in touch with, stay in touch with the HousingLIN, because that's really where the expertise is now accumulating. And we all need you, Jeremy. Great stuff. Congratulations on getting to 10 years. Brilliant stuff. The HousingLIN has looked after several of the inquiry reports that we've done. The APPG does an inquiry every couple of years. We did one on rental housing for an aging population. That was sponsored by Peabody. We did one on rural housing for an aging population. That was Hastow Housing Association helped us with that one. The great thing is, if you've got the HousingLIN on board, these reports don't gather dust. There's somebody there promoting them, taking the thing on. Reports don't sit on shelves anymore, do they? We don't even have the reports, but they get lost in the cloud somewhere. But it doesn't happen if you've got the HousingLIN on board and working with you. And that's what happened with our most recent APPG report on housing for people with dementia. And that's what I'm going to just concentrate on today. But I will just in passing mention that we've got a new inquiry starting on Monday. We launch it on Monday, and this is our shared ownership housing for an aging population panel for innovation. Now, those initials give me a very nice acronym, shared ownership housing for an aging population, So Happy. So this is the So Happy inquiry, which starts on Monday. Housing 21 are looking after us again there, using the Smith Institute, and of course Jeremy is on board and very much part of that from the HousingLIN. So that's the future, but this year we launched Housing for People with Dementia, Are We Ready? And Katie Twyford was alongside Jeremy doing great work on this one. Now, in my introduction to the report, I say there's no vaccine for dementia. It's a progressive illness, and more of us are going to be afflicted by it. Bruce mentioned 850,000 people roughly today who are living with dementia. That number is set to rise to 1.5 million people. Are we really ready for all of this? Well, I've divided my talk into three. Are we ready? Who is we? The first kind of we is each of us individually, ourselves. The second kind of we is we collectively, communally, the government, the nation, society. And my third kind of we, are we ready, is the practitioners, the people on the ground, people in the audience for this talk today, for this session today, the we who are trying to do something about it for real as practitioners. So first of all, are we ready, the we being us? Each of us, as we get older, are we getting ready for dementia? We absolutely are not, are we? We just put this at the back of our minds, even for our parents, if you're not as old as me, we put it to the back of our minds and hope this will just go away. We don't face up to the fact that 1 in 6 of us is going to be diagnosed with dementia by the time we're 80. I think 5 out of 6 of us won't be so mentally agile when we get to 80. I see it with my friends all around me. We need to look ahead and see what we might do to prepare ourselves for a very high probability of needing some extra support. We have to ask ourselves, is our home going to be friendly to us? Is our home dementia ready? Is it dementia friendly? And if it isn't, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to move? Are we going to plan to right size somewhere else, somewhere that will suit us? Or are we going to adapt the property? To what extent are we going to, and should we, be worrying about being lonely, being on our own? We may be a couple at the moment, but what happens when we're on our own? What happens when we can't drive anymore? We moved out to that nice suburb, fine, yes, but we're dependent on the car. We tend to put these things to the back of our minds and just hope they'll go away. We need to be facing up to the fact that dementia is going to be a reality for a lot of us. And indeed, loneliness is going to be a mental health problem for a lot of us in the future. Should we move to a place where we're going to have companionship, people around us, have the safety and security if anything goes wrong, of other people being there to help us? Let's not just put it off. Don't wait for the crisis. And in terms of new tech, let's keep up to date. Let's keep up to the minute in what could help us in older age, in the homes that we live in. Get more tech savvy. Get more tech savvy while you've got the capability of learning. People of my age can't learn a new language. It's very, very hard to learn a new language in your mid-70s. And equally, it's hard to pick up on the tech that's coming our way. But that's going to save us and help us and support us in all kinds of ways. Wendy Mitchell, who gave evidence to our inquiry and has been living with dementia for some years, and is a wonderful example of how you can live with dementia and live well with dementia. She uses Alexa night and day, literally. Alexa is her friend. Great, she's adapted and is using technology. So the first message about getting ready is getting ready ourselves as individuals. Get all the advice you can. Age Concern, HUK, I should say, Alzheimer's Society. I think the NHS website needs to direct us, its portal, more easily into the advice and guidance on the things that we can do for ourselves. But let's get ready as individuals. Second, we as the community at large, as government, as society, are we ready? We absolutely are not. I can say from within Parliament, the issues are not being faced. We hope that government is just beginning to turn a corner and get more interested in the whole theme of retirement housing, with and without people living with dementia as part of that. Government is, I think, I hope, we may be sort of moving towards a little bit of a tipping point. The current Housing Minister, Chris Pincher, said quite good and positive things at our last meeting. He's talking to the Department for Health and Social Care about the link between housing and care. They know that this saves the NHS money. The right housing means people don't go into hospital because of accidents. They don't keep calling for ambulances. They don't keep calling the police. They don't keep going to the GP in the safe environment of an extra care scheme or even ordinary retirement housing. NHS saves serious money. People can be discharged faster from hospital and they don't go back in again. Readmissions are down and care costs are down too. It helps the state, it helps the nation as a whole if the housing is right. But government has been neglectful over so long, we've got an awful lot of catching up to do. We're not building the homes. 7,000 homes, 7,500 the last calendar year of homes, especially for those for later living. 7,500. The government's target of new homes is 300,000. This is a puny contribution, and we've got to increase it. There's got to be more housing that is purpose-built, that provides the setting in which you can have companionship, you can have other people around you, there's mutual support and help, as we all know in the world of retirement housing and retirement communities. But how's government doing? Well, the Health and Care Bill, we're now seeing what government is going to bring before Parliament. This is all about integrating health and care services, not so much about integrating health and care and housing services, which is where we come in. But Care and Repair England, I recommend their briefing on the Health and Care Bill. They give it a few points. There is some good stuff about housing, which we don't always get with social care and health legislation and white papers and so on. We're going to have a review of DFGs, and that will include looking at more technical assistive technology. It's time DFGs were reviewed, made more flexible, made more helpful. There's going to be funding for minor repairs, which sounds like more funding for handy person schemes. In terms of home adaptations, government are beginning to get the message there. There's funding for the Care and Support Specialist Housing Fund, the cash fund. There's more cash coming down the line there. Sadly, Part M42, it always sounds like a motorway, doesn't it? But the higher accessibility standards they put off till later, coming to a decision on whether all new homes are going to be to much nearer the full lifetime home specification. They put that one off for the moment. But there's there's some more funding. There's a beginning, I think, to be an acknowledgement that housing is part of the debate on health and care, and that's an important, perhaps a potential sea change for the future. The Adult Social Care White Paper announces that we're going to have a dementia strategy in 2022, which is a very powerful sign. So maybe after the moaning from my all-party parliamentary group and others for so long, and the HousingLIN campaigning for so long, maybe there's a bit of a breakthrough coming and a bit more interest from government. I sincerely hope so. And the third kind of we is the practitioners, the people engaged day to day in providing for those who may be diagnosed with dementia and may have other physical frailties too, and who need the care and support that extra care schemes and indeed retirement housing can provide. A recent study showed that 23%, roughly a quarter of everybody in extra care has dementia, and to one degree or another. This number, a quarter, is going to grow. Vastly higher figure, of course, in residential care, and increasingly extra care is replacing residential care as the modern and much better version of how people can live in older age. We're going to see an awful lot of the people who we are dealing with as housing associations, as local authorities, in residential settings of different kinds. We're going to see an increasing number with a problem of dementia, and we need to understand and know about that. Have we got a dementia champion on the board of our organization? Have we got a dementia champion at the top of the staffing tree, a chief officer in the housing association, in the local authority? Have we got a champion? And have we spread the idea of dementia friends through the organization? Have we got more people who are signed up to be a dementia friend and who understand what that means? I think we are ready. We are ready to do more. We need to be geared at the ready for the future, which is going to include a lot more people with dementia. We're trying to understand how technology can help us. We've got some amazing examples, geospatial systems that enable people to be able to wander at will, which is a great blessing in older age without getting lost, because they've always got their positioning watch on their wrist, and people will know where they are and be able to bring them back again if they've strayed too far. We can use technology to liberate ourselves in different ways. I think that the practitioners, the people within social housing providers, within local authorities, I think they are getting ready, and I'm really pleased about that, because this is where a lot of the action is going to be in the future, and I wish everybody well in meeting those increasing challenges of dementia for the future. Read our report, if you possibly can, online from the APPG or from the Housing 21 website. Many thanks.
Thank you, Richard. That's great and really good introduction. I think those three elements of personal, government and practitioner all play into what we need to address. Some great links in the chat as well, so hopefully we'll be able to follow up those in terms of as a great resource as well to people to reference. I referenced the Dementia Housing Working Group, which is picking up some of the inquiry's recommendations in terms of access to dementia-friendly design and technology. Obviously the Dementia Strategy promised in the white papers a really good process, but I think perhaps one of the things that I hope the panel will discuss is how we can get more housing organisations to become and make the commitment to be dementia friendly, like Guinness Trust did, and take that further. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Chris Peach to do the next session. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Bruce. I'll quickly try and share my screen. Hopefully it all goes to plan. All good? Yep, perfect. So yeah, thank you everyone. My name is Chris Peach. I am the Exec Director of Extra Care at Housing 21. I've worked for Housing 21 for nearly 12 years now. My goodness me, I can't believe it's gone. There's so many years, but I've enjoyed every single one of them and look forward to many more as well. I thought I'd quickly just give you some facts and figures about Housing 21, although many of you will already know this. So we are a leading provider of extra care and retirement living for older people of modest means. We have over 140 extra care schemes now and nearly 400 retirement living schemes across England and 20,000 properties. I say England, we have one in Guernsey as well. We're delivering over 38,000 hours of care per week into a number of our extra care schemes, and we have over 90% of our services which are regulated good or outstanding by the CQC. And we've got over 3,000 staff now as well, our employees, and the majority of those are in extra care because of our care workers. So I know it's already been referenced, but as I'm going to talk about it, I'll just quickly reference the external context that I know Richard's already mentioned and Bruce too. We're all well aware of the new social care reform paper that was published last week, and I'm sure many of us will have our views on if this goes far enough. It probably doesn't, but I want to draw out a couple of good points that have already been mentioned. When introducing the paper, I think it was Gillian Keegan that referred to the important role of housing with care, extra care, and how the impact it has on people, the positive impact it has on people living with dementia, and generally on health and social care. I totally agree with that, and I'm really hopeful more people will start to see the important role it can play on wider society, and again for people living with dementia. Jeremy also mentioned the positive reference to the paper and the government launching a Dementia Strategy in 2022, something I think we would all welcome and really look forward to. Secondly, within the report was following, Richard talked about the APPG, Inquiry into Housing with Care for Older People, appropriately named, as Richard said, Housing for People with Dementia. Are we ready? I think there were 44 recommendations, Richard, within that, so it would suggest we're definitely not ready, but lots more work to do. There were two particular ones that I know many of the colleagues are focusing on for the keen eye among us all. That was 34 and 35, looking at design and technology for older people living with dementia, and also the role of dementia champions. And I'll talk about dementia champions a little bit in a second, but both great recommendations that I know lots of actions are already underway and being taken to address. So design and technology is really important, and it does really have a huge role to play in housing people living with dementia, and it should certainly not be underestimated. We know even the experts can sometimes get this wrong. The picture on the left is the stairs in the International Longevity Centre in Brazil. I'm not sure any of us would feel comfortable using those stairs, and certainly not if you happen to be living with dementia. I am really pleased to hear, though, that the Dementia and Housing Working Group has taken up the challenge of focusing on recommendation 34 and providing lots of useful resource for housing providers. It's a great document that's being produced, with lots of good links as well for many housing providers out there. So what Housing 21 doing to address this? So a couple of things. One of the key areas we have been focusing on, and is built into the strategic priorities, is to ensure we provide better information, guidance and support to our residents and their family members. We initially focused on dementia friends sessions and bringing this not only to employees, but also residents, their friends, family, and also contractors that were working in our services. We've since built on this, producing some helpful leaflets and continuing to raise awareness of people living with dementia in our schemes. The documents in the picture are two of our recent information leaflets we've produced for all residents, which continue to prove useful, and we get some really positive feedback on. We know there can sometimes be a stigma attached to dementia. We want to ensure all of our residents have good awareness so they too can support each other, and important to be aware of the early signs of dementia, which is something we've recently started raising awareness of in our schemes. And again, we've had some positive feedback from family members in particular on those awareness sessions. Looking ahead in a little bit more detail, we've produced 5 steps as part of the strategy to help improve the services we offer for residents living in our properties and those in receipt of care living with dementia, and of course how we support our friends and family. The Dementia Advocates, which many of you will know, we've had some of these now for nearly 2 years. We introduced them about 2 years ago, and they're made up of volunteers from across Housing 21 that had an interest in learning more about dementia. We provided our advocates with additional training and support and raised awareness across the business. This meant that all managers knew there was people that they could pick up the phone to and ask advice on, and it's proved really successful. We're really pleased how well that's gone. Following the success of this, we're about to implement dementia practice hubs, which will be led by the Dementia Advocates. The hubs themselves will be regular forum for all employees from across Housing 21, and they'll come together, share good practice and seek advice from peers. This will also be an opportunity where regular updates and industry practice will be shared. We also currently have a cohort of some of our learning and development team undertaking postgraduate certificate in delivering person-centred dementia care, and they were doing that with the University of Worcester. We expect this will be complete next year, where we'll be utilising the newly obtained skills and training to use across all of our services to support people living with dementia. In turn, the new practice leads will train at least one member of staff in each of our extra care schemes where we provide the care. Once trained by the practice leads, coaches will become the lead expert in the scheme in supporting people living with dementia. They'll also be responsible for training and raising awareness across staff teams and focusing on the care and support planning of residents in receipt of services. What we really want to do is ensure that all residents who are receiving support from Housing 21 have the best possible outcomes, and the coaches will have a really important role to play in this. Furthermore, just taking a little bit further, we would also like to pass this knowledge and awareness on to all commercial businesses working in extra care schemes to widen the knowledge and understanding of people living with dementia. Finally, we've recently set up the Dementia Focus Group, which includes residents living with dementia and also family members. We're using this group to look at actions we are taking within the strategy and in what areas the focus group consider we should try and improve. Although it's only in the very early stages, we've had a few meetings now, it is really clear that this group is going to have a potential great impact on improving the services that we offer to people living with dementia, and ensure we continue, really importantly, to see the offer through the lens of our residents and their family members. Listening to the experiences of our residents is really important and can be the only real way we can ensure we're improving services in the right areas. I'm really pleased to say that one of our residents we've got included in the presentation this morning, Christine. Christine is living with dementia in one of our extra care schemes in Sutton. Christine is also part of the project led by Worcester University on supporting people living with dementia in extra care housing, which I'm sure Becky will follow up on shortly after my presentation. Unfortunately, though, Christine was unable to make it for a live chat this morning. She told me she had a better offer. I'm not quite sure what that means for me, but we were able to record a quick conversation that was recorded last Friday. So I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to Sally.
Right, do let me know if you can hear this. Okay, right. I'm not sure what happened, but it won't let me open it. So let me give it another go. Right, I'll try and share my screen again. Can you see that?
Yeah.
We have liftoff, I think. I think we have liftoff. Right, so Christine, we thought it would be really, really important. We really want to hear your views from a resident's perspective at the session. So I know you're not able to make it, so we thought we'd ask you a couple of questions and we'll have a little bit of a chat if that's okay. So first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've lived at Dimmond House?
Yes, well, I'm pretty old. So I'm 80, just 81. So tells me.
And how long have you lived at Dimmond House, Christine?
3 years, about 3 years.
About 3 years. Have you enjoyed it?
Well, actually, yes, I have, and I am mainly thanks to Donna and the rest of the girls. I don't know, it's just like one family living here. It's just I get up in the morning and I think, oh yes, day room, and everybody sort of gravitates towards the day room, and it's lovely. It's a lovely atmosphere. But I think Donna's had an awful lot to do with this in getting everybody together, because at first, we all sat in corners of chairs and didn't speak and just listened. But
now you're talking to lots of other residents there as well, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Now it's just one big family, really, and we're interested in their families as well. I have a daughter, they live in Wallington.
Okay.
So when Jane comes, that's lovely to see her, and there's plenty of space for us to go. My flat or the day room. It's just lovely. I wish I could sort of think of a moment.
That's okay. Can you maybe just thinking about living with dementia as well, Christine, and how may possibly living at Dimmond House has helped you live independently still, or can you talk a little bit about that?
I think having been here with it, I think it's helped enormously because it, you know, before it was the D word, and people whispered it. You know, even my daughter was, you know, if we went in a restaurant or anything, she would sort of very quietly say to the waitress or whatever, you know, my mother has dementia. You know, and she'd say, haven't you? And I'd say, what? And be a bit naughty, really. But there was this stigma. I don't know if it's cleared or not because I don't go out an awful lot, but there is this stigma about the D word that, you know, it's not a nice word to mention, which I find, you know, it's difficult to accept really because you feel perfectly all right.
Oh, I think there is still stigma there, Christine. I think that still happens around living with dementia, and people talk about suffering, don't they? And that's not actually the case at all. You can live very well with dementia. Yeah,
it's just you just suddenly feel very, but you don't hear. That is the point, really. I was trying to sort of enlarge on. Here, we're treated as normal, healthy, happy people. And one big family, which I think is amazing for a care home, which I've never been in before. So, you know, I've visited a few with various people, but it's just, I thought it's easy.
Yeah, I think extra care is a different thing as well, isn't it? So you live independently in your own home and apartment, as well as being able to join into the activities and things that are happening there. And
that's right. I mean, you know, you come down here and you think, oh, I don't want to see what's on the TV tonight. I'm just going up to my flat, which I'm lucky, it's just up the hall. You know, and you'll find something on the TV in there and sort of sit and watch that. And it's just, it works.
Yeah. Brilliant. Now, I understand that you're part of an advisory group, very exciting, with Teresa, speaking about how you're living with dementia as well and how we need to hear the voice of residents. How are you getting on with that?
Okay, because you know, you don't think to yourself, oh, I've got the D word. Yeah. You know, it's because people whisper it to you. Or even my daughter has done this until I've sort of hissed at her to stop. You know, she'll say, my mother has dementia. You know, and their voice is lower and they sort of whisper.
Has it been good to be part of that advisory group, though, that you're talking with now?
Very much so, because it's given me a little bit more confidence because, you know, before my husband died a couple of years ago, after 50-odd years of marriage, came down here. And so it was a whole new ball game to start all over living again, if you like. And thanks to people like Donna and the rest of the group down here, the carers, I think I've achieved that, or I am achieving it. You know, it's nice. There's no formality that you have to follow. I can't explain it in any other sort of sense.
I think that's a really good explanation. I think that works really well. And I guess being part of that advisory group will help others as well, and both kind of looking at services for people living with dementia, but just lots of other avenues as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I was a Samaritan for 15 years or so in Scarborough.
At Scarborough.
I've always sort of been used to, you know, then I had the hotel before that as well. So I've always been used to dealing with people, if you like. Then I was a secretary in the special school in Scarborough, which we had 50 boarders, 50-day children, and they were just lovely, but very demanding.
I can imagine.
Typing with sheets all over your desk. Miss, do you love me, Miss? You know, and being arm around your neck and the boss saying, you know, Chrissy, where's that? Oh yes, it's coming.
Well, hopefully all of that. Hopefully all of that helps with this role as well, though, the advisory role. So getting it all organised, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a really, really good learning curve.
Is there anything else about living at Dimmond or living in an extra care facility, or anything in general that you want to speak about or tell us before we?
Well, I think we're just so fortunate. If anybody, shall I say, quote, kicks off or moans about anything here, I mean, I've had 2 or 3 sort of, you don't know you're born, because really this is a very, very good place to have to be if you have dementia and you're in care. The girls are really down to a T, Donna in particular, but they're so caring. They've always got time to just listen that extra 2 minutes, which means a lot. I don't know. Yes, I never thought I would be, because I've never been in care or in a home before, but it's fine.
Brilliant. Well, I'm gonna leave it there then. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a quick chat with us, Christine. I think your insights, especially on the advisory panel with Teresa, are going to be fantastic and help lots more residents and other people when they're thinking about services for people living with dementia. So thank you so much for your time, Christine.
Thank you too.
So I think I'm sure you'll agree that it's great to hear from one of our residents, and Christine certainly enjoys her time in extra care scheme, even though she refers to it as a care home, but she won't be the first and she definitely won't be the last. So very quickly in closing, I do think it's really important that we involve as many residents in projects that impact them directly. And I'm sure Christine, along with many others, will have great value in projects moving forward and certainly improving the housing offer for people living with dementia. Thank you for listening. Bruce.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you particularly to Christine, because I think it's such wonderful to hear from people like Christine, real people live with real experiences, not defined by the D word, but all her other life experiences. So I think we're going to pass over now to Yasmin to talk about the diversity and inclusion aspect. So thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you very much. I will just quickly share my screen. Can you see that? Is that okay? Sorry. Okay, is that sharing?
It is sharing, but we're also seeing the next slide, so you just need to go to slideshow.
Okay, right, sorry.
Go to present slide.
Right, sorry. Okay.
That should be it.
Sorry. Okay. Something's up on right. Can everyone see it now? Sorry. I think my internet's being especially slow. Anyway, I'll make up. Hi everyone, my name's Yasmin. I work as a policy executive at Foundations. Brilliant. And today I'm going to be talking about dementia readiness and how we are currently responding to the need to be dementia ready. Before I start, I'd like to develop the idea of dementia readiness. So, as it's already been said this morning, dementia diagnosis is an increasing reality for more and more people every year. It is estimated that in 2019, 55.2 million people worldwide were living with dementia, and this figure is obviously increasing annually. It is now time that we recognise this increase and prepare ourselves to help create a dementia-friendly society. When I have previously spoken about dementia readiness, my target audience was those in positions of power who are able to guide the way and set an example for best practice with dementia readiness in a way that will be able to inspire and assist people with dementia and their families and carers. My main points revolved around the need for those in the sector to take a responsibility to lead and guide, housing policies having a limited reference to dementia, as my report found that only 14.7 of the available 279 housing assistance policies had a specific grant for dementia. It recommended having available help through information hubs for people, increased widespread training that goes beyond awareness training, and including personal preference and people throughout dementia work. I produced these recommendations from a range of reports, namely the APPG report on housing for people with dementia and my own, and there have been efforts to respond to these since I last spoke. I'd like to share these with you today, as these changes are relatively simple and have the capacity to help us all be able to respond to being dementia ready. After each item, I will lay out how your organisation can embark on similar steps to lead us towards dementia readiness. One important recommendation for working towards dementia readiness is working with the Disabled Facilities Grant to promote adaptations which are most helpful for people with dementia. Since the publication of my report, an increased number of local authorities are moving towards dementia-inclusive housing assistance policies. However, these policies should go to lengths to include adaptations which would be most useful for people with dementia. Burnley Borough Council have done this well. Their website presents a list of simple adaptations for dementia, as you can see on this slide. Not only have these types of adaptations been described by people with dementia and occupational therapists as really important for people with dementia to remain independent in their own homes, as I found in my report, but they'll also save money. They're a lot cheaper than the larger adaptations such as stair lifts and wet rooms, which we know are most commonly being provided by the DFG. We know that the DFG is being used overwhelmingly on these more expensive types of adaptations, when the examples on this slide show that for housing policy to be dementia ready, it does not require lots of money or heavy work, rather cheaper, easier and creative solutions. Moving towards dementia readiness can increase the confidence of policymakers and local authorities to find innovative policy solutions. Another recommendation was that services work more smoothly with other branches to provide person-centred care and truly help people. In this area, Warrington also demonstrates some excellent practice regarding the services that they offer for people with dementia and their families and carers. The Lifetime Centre, under the banner of Warrington Housing Association, offers a lot of benefits for elderly and or disabled people and their families and carers. They offer classes which include knitting with carers and activities for people with dementia. This interesting overlap between housing and care has provided a physical link for people with dementia in that the services are provided next door to the Housing Association and other services. This means that the people using the Lifetime services can approach members of staff and the excellent volunteers for anything that they need or any issues that may have. And these members of staff can then direct them to the other services that are provided in the area.
Yasmin, yes. We're having some interference on the line with you. I
okay.
wonder whether if you'd stop sharing your screen, we might get your voice better, because I think we definitely want to hear what you've got to say, and I think we'd rather than being garbled. So if that's better. So just
would you like me to share them on your behalf? Because I think I have
that might be helpful, Sally. We're losing some of your...
Is that helpful? Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to disrupt you.
That's okay.
There we go. If I do that on your behalf, your connection might be slightly better. Were you on this page?
No, next one.
It was the next one. Sorry about that.
Great.
One more, Sally. I think the next one after that.
It was this one. It was this one.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Oh, that's okay. So sorry about that. So the emotional benefit of the services provided by Warrington are the online classes that they've been running. So they've been working with the current restrictions to ensure that people with dementia and their family and carers are still included and can still contribute. So they run mindfulness classes over Zoom, as well as in-person ones working with the current regulations. This class provided clear benefits to both the people with dementia, who were able to interact and socialise over a cuppa, but also their carers, who were able to have 2 hours of downtime whilst the class was running. It's these experiences that matter when we are working for people with dementia, and we should aim to capture these as best as possible. Next slide, please, Sally. So local authorities should work with the flexibility within their RRO to provide dementia-specific grants with simple adaptations on offer. This has not only proved extremely helpful for assisting those with dementia in their own homes, but these simple adaptations are also much cheaper than the more complex, larger adaptations. You can update your list of available adaptations to become more dementia inclusive, and housing associations should also seek to forge stronger links with their local communities and non-profit organisations and dedicate their time and resources into engaging people with dementia in creative ways. Next slide, please. It's a given that having information available is all good and well, but it falls victim to tokenism if you can't find it. In response to this, we have made steps towards making the information available more easily accessible. Using the website Padlet, the Dementia and Housing Working Group have created an information hub for all things dementia related. It's relevant for people with dementia and their families and carers, as well as practitioners, those in house and housing, and also academics. It's only in the early stages of being set up, but the general idea is that it contains links to relevant dementia-related information, enabling people to access information as early as possible. It's important to remember that having accessible information is a very broad term, and when thinking about being dementia inclusive for all, accessibility may look very different. This space for information can also provide a space for inclusion. People with dementia is not one stark category. Different people will require different types of information, accessible in different forms and different languages. It's important that your organisation considers the accessibility factor when it's promoting dementia-related information and any other information. So I'm now going to show you the information page on Padlet so that you can get an idea of what we're trying to create. Of course, we're open to any comments or feedback or any reflections. I'm not sure if I should share my screen here or if that's, I can give it a go. 1 second. Right. Yeah. As you can see here, there is a page with the headings underneath, such as adaptations, charities, design, research, and housing options. So it goes all the way down here, so that users can easily navigate and find information that they need. We'll put some descriptions underneath the links, so like the one here, so that you know exactly what you're going to click on before you click on it. Padlet is good, it means that you can enter posts yourself. So you can enter posts onto the Padlet and then we can approve them, and then you can then share information with us yourself. So if you have or know of any information that you think could be represented on the Padlet, please email me, or you can try and put it onto the Padlet yourself by clicking on the plus here, and then it gives you the option to post whatever you want, essentially. If you click on the 3 dots, it gives you the different formats of the different types of things you can post. And then once you've done, you just click the button to publish it, and then it will go through the approval and will approve your post, and it can be represented on the Padlet. Padlet's also good as it lets us talk to one another, and you can leave feedback and comments on the Padlet page itself. So you can either post a comment here, or you can rate the post itself. So finally, sharing and accessing the Padlet. The Padlet can be shared as a link, so I can email it to you through this, or it can also be sent as a QR code. If you want it to be embedded into your own website so that you can also use it as a resource for your organisation, I can also send you the HTML code. But if you have any questions about Padlet or want any more information, then please feel free to email me. Padlet is a great but simple idea, which is also being used to promote the Dementia and Housing Working Group's support of the delivery of recommendation 34 of the APPG report. This involves creating a go-to resource, including information on technology-enabled care, services in the home, information pooling and designs for dementia and other training and work. This is an important part of Dementia Readiness, as it not only ensures that leaders in the sector are able to guide us with best practice, but in sharing and pooling information, we are all able to become more informed together. Hopefully this will now let me share my slides. Okay. Your organisation can get itself represented on the Padlet, or any information sources that you may think are useful, please email me and I can get these onto the Padlet as well. Also keep an eye out for the 2-page run recommendation 34, which I think was shared earlier, as it's a great starter to the work that we're doing in this area on dementia and technology. Your organisation could also try to start its own Padlet, local information for people with dementia and their families and carers. Relevant and targeted information must be made available throughout the sector for people with dementia and their families and carers to make as informed decision as possible. Your information must be accessible, meaning it can be accessed by different groups and communities, especially those who typically struggle when finding accessible and targeted information, and it should also be up to date. Providing space for learning about dementia within your organisation is just as important as providing it to your clients, which brings me on to my next point of training. We have established that the Dementia Friends Awareness Programme run by the Alzheimer's Society, whilst great, is not considered to be dementia trained. Obviously, dementia-specific training is expected of our sector to become dementia ready, as the more we learn about certain things, the better equipped we can be to deal with them. Examples of this are on a slide. However, since I last spoke about dementia readiness, I've embarked on some LGBTQ+ training with the LGBT Foundation. This training involved situations with elderly and disabled people and how their experiences of being LGBTQ+ have differed from heteronormative experiences of ageing and disability. It's also provided useful information about how to ensure that your workspace is LGBT inclusive. Whilst this may seem far off from how you picture people with dementia, working to ensure that your services are inclusive for all requires considering the needs of those who are already marginalised and putting in the work to ensure that they receive the appropriate services for their needs. To be dementia ready for all, service providers must make sure that they are ready to respond to the needs and preferences of all, promoting inclusive workspaces and ensuring that staff are trained to meet the needs of all rather than the needs of some. So essentially, your organisation should endeavour to take part in more training. Within all of these measures, there has been space to include personal preference and experiences. It's these which make up our identity, and it's this idea of identity that we should be emphasising when making policy for people. Throughout all of these examples, personal preference has been included. So, for the housing policies, providing personal preference involves providing adaptations which consider aesthetic and style, as well as practicality and appropriateness, facilitating personal choice for people with dementia and their families and carers. The Warrington example is rooted in an approach to person-centrism which underscores all of the work that they do. With the Padlet and the other items that the Dementia and Housing Working Group have launched throughout the week, including the response to Recommendation 34, the group is aiming to pilot these things with people with dementia and their families and carers. And finally, the training examples mentioned today seek to go beyond the one-size-fits-all approach to service provision. We can't know what people want by guessing, so this seems like great initiatives to test the work that we're doing. So to get involved, you should ask your clients and their families and carers, but also your colleagues. Personal experiences are everywhere, and these are what matters to people. To put these experiences at the forefront of dementia readiness is to put people first. So here is a brief recap of all of the recommendations I have discussed in this presentation. The links between housing, health and social care that we all want to make stronger and more resilient will forge themselves if we work together to implement this approach of dementia readiness. I hope this presentation has provided some insight into the simple and effective ways in which we can become more dementia ready. Fundamentally, for society to move towards dementia readiness, we need to be dementia ready for all. These steps can help contribute to this inclusion, whereby all people with dementia and their families and carers can have a say in what they want. If you have any questions or want any further information, then my email is on the screen at the bottom of the slide. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and sorry about the...
No problem at all, Jasmine. Thank you very much. I think we can stop sharing the screen now. And then back. So that's great. I'm sorry about that, but there's a huge amount of interest in the Padlet and the development of it, in both the questions and the comments. So we make sure that your slides are available to everybody after this, and all the links, because I think that you really, the work you're doing in the Housing Dementia Working Group is really obviously, as I think it should be, really well recognised, and really does help address one of the issues from the inquiry into that process. So I'm going to pass over now to Becky, who follow on from that. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Hopefully we won't have the same issues. There we go. Hopefully that's all working fine. So yeah, my name's Becky. I'm a research associate at the Association for Dementia Studies at the University of Worcester. You've already met Christine, who's on our advisory group, but I'm going to share with you some insight into the project that she's working on that's looking at living with dementia in extra care housing. And that's funded by the National Institute of Health Research School for Social Care. And I'm going to just reflect a bit, I guess, on how it aligns with the APPG's report. So in particular, with respect to the report, our project very much aligns with key issues 3 and 19. So 3 is about the need for access to good information. People living with dementia, their families and carers, don't always receive sufficient information and advice about the housing implications or housing options that they have. Whilst 19 draws attention to the fact that the impacts of housing to support people living with dementia are very much under-researched in the UK. And for me, these two kind of go hand in hand. It's very difficult to provide good information without good quality research to underpin that advice. So I'm aware that I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but as the APPG has reported, there's this growing evidence for the role of housing in improving health and well-being. Home is a place where we all expect to feel safe. It's a place where things are familiar to us, where our family and friends visit, and where we're connected to our local community. And for people living with dementia, as we all know, this is vitally important. But all too often what we see is that people living with dementia move at the point of crisis, creating unnecessary trauma for them, for their families, and actually potentially undermining some of the benefits that a proactive move to appropriate housing might have had at a different point in diagnosis. It's that what's becoming a sort of classic quote, every decision about care is a decision about housing. And it's long been thought that extra care housing can be this potential solution that promotes well-being, that provides an environment that supports living with independence, that maximises skills and abilities, and that delays or even prevents a move to residential care. So it's thought really that it can also reduce these overall costs of health and social care. And in effect, I guess it fits very well with strengths-based and rights-based models of dementia care and support, as well as the personalisation and prevention agendas within wider UK policy. But certainly what we know is that more high-quality research is needed that includes the perspectives of people living with dementia to understand more about what works and what doesn't work in extra care housing for people living with dementia. So I'm very briefly going to touch on what is extra care housing. I'm sure most of you are well aware of it, but just because there are lots of different terminologies out there. So from our kind of point of view in the project, extra care housing is this model of care and support that's intended to meet the needs of older people and support independent living for as long as possible. In practice, this involves living in self-contained accommodation, usually your own flat or apartment, that might be rented, leased, bought, or any combination of these options within a much kind of larger complex. And that includes the on-site provision of flexible 24-hour care for when you want it, and access to a range of communal activities and facilities. And as I think Lord Best went with a quarter, I've gone for just over a fifth, the 23%. Of people living in extra care housing have a diagnosed or suspected dementia. And as Lord Best said, this number is likely to increase as the prevalence of dementia continues to increase and people are being diagnosed at a much younger age. And yet, as I've said, there actually remains little evidence out there as to what works best and for whom with respect to extra care housing for people living with dementia. Although there's significant variety across extra care schemes and I mean in terms of different designs, different locations, populations, different styles of provision, different facilities available, what we see is that there are three common models or types of extra care housing for supporting people living with dementia. By far the most common is an integrated model where people living with dementia live alongside residents without dementia. Some schemes use a specialist model that's exclusively for people living with dementia. And finally, a third model that's relatively rare has a separate unit or area, or sometimes called wing, for people living with dementia, where residents without dementia then live in other areas of the scheme. Previous studies have highlighted some key features of extra care housing that can help people with dementia to live well. So things like dementia-friendly design, having that flexible care available, good use of technology, lots of opportunities for social activity, and a real key kind of benefit and also appeal, actually, of extra care housing is thought to be the level of safety and security that it can provide. And there are some really good examples of practice around, but as I say, this evidence base is quite limited. There is a lack of perspectives actually from people living with dementia still. There's limited information about the benefits of extra care housing for people with greater levels of care needs. Questions have certainly been asked about whether extra care housing can support people with more advanced dementia or particular symptoms of dementia. And there's this real lack of information about the advantages and disadvantages of those different models available, those the integrated, specialist and separated. Gaps also exist with respect to the needs of people in minority groups, how they might experience extra care housing. And there are often reports still of stigma, even within extra care. There's a bit of research out there that considers extra care housing more broadly for older people, but actually often fails to delineate results related to people living with dementia from those more general population findings. Or what we quite often see is that people living with dementia are excluded as a result of concerns over their capacity to consent to take part. And whilst absolutely some of that literature rooted in the kind of generic extra care population may well be relevant to some people living with dementia, it's really difficult to know what, how, and why without specifically talking to people with lived experience. Another thing just to sort of touch on is this recent study from Verbeek, who looked at frontline practitioners' views of extra care housing for people living with dementia. And what she found was that frontline practitioners actually questioned how and where extra care housing fits in alongside receiving domiciliary care in one's own home and then living in residential care home. And what this demonstrates is there's still this kind of lack of perhaps knowledge or understanding of how extra care housing can support people living with dementia. And in fact, actually a very recent kind of hot off the press, Rachel Dutton's paper on COVID-19 in extra care housing also noted that there was this lack of understanding about what extra care housing is and how it could work with respect to the local government and also health and social care responses to COVID-19. So there's clearly some gaps in the knowledge there. So what are we doing? At first sight, this might look quite complicated, probably looks quite colourful, but hopefully I'm going to explain it quite simply. So this is the DEMET project. It's an NIHR SSCR funded supporting people living with dementia in extra care housing project. And this is the one that Christine's on the advisory group for. And really the aim of it is to fill in some of these gaps in the evidence. So the first stage of the project, which is nearing completion, is this light green box at the top here. This is a scoping literature review, which has been done just to summarise what's out there, what's already known about the advantages and challenges of extra care housing for people living with dementia. The second stage is currently live. This is this gold box over here, the surveys. So we're currently running 3 surveys to gather the experiences of people living with dementia, of family carers, of residents living with dementia in extra care housing, as well as information and perspectives from commissioners in adult social care. Excuse me. These surveys, as well as the literature review, will then inform our data collection at 9 different case study sites. And this is this large kind of light blue shaded area here. So we're currently in the process of identifying a range of 9 case study sites that represent those different models, the integrated, specialist and separated, but also the diversity in extra care housing schemes. We'll be visiting each site to collect lots of different data, observe and talk to people who live and also work there, as well as the social care workers and commissioners connected to the schemes, to really get those kind of first-hand perspectives from people living with dementia, as well as other stakeholders, as to what works well and for whom in extra care. Excuse me. Following analysis then, as part of the dissemination work, we'll be hosting some focus groups. So this is this gold box down here at the bottom, in order to really translate our research findings into meaningful guidance, culminating in the production of some key insight booklets aimed at commissioners, health and social care professionals, and importantly, people affected by dementia and their families. Excuse me. Such that people have access to the good information that's called for by the APPG. I've not got long to go and I'm about to lose my voice. Not COVID, just a cold, but I suspect you're glad that this is online and not in person. Yes, so these key insight booklets will be really important to make sure that people have access to the good information that's called for by the APPG. Sorry. As the APPG report states, best practice in design for people with dementia continues to be developed and shaped by what people with dementia tell us about what works and what doesn't. And this value is very much at the heart of the DEMET project too. As you know, you've met Christine, who's on the advisory group and is steering this project. And that's a key part of how we work at the Association for Dementia Studies. Very quickly, these are the links for the surveys if you want to take part. Well, please do get in touch if you're interested in being a case study site or just want to know more about the research. The question the APPG report asked was, are we ready? And what I'd say is we're certainly trying to get better ready and hope that the DEMET project will go some way to filling in some of the gaps in knowledge and practice that exist with respect to how extra care housing can work for people living with dementia. Finally, before I curl up and die, you can connect with us on Twitter. And as mentioned, the DEMET project is funded by the NIHR SSCR. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Becky, and very bravely thought through that. So that was fantastic, and I think you've prompted some questions in the question session about sort of the models and the way we provide that. We haven't got. I haven't seen that Jane and Jack have joined us yet. They may still be on at their launch. So I propose that we go now to the panel discussion, and we've got some questions that have been posted already, and some preferences identified within those. And so Yasmin, you've generated a lot of interest about that, and I think some of those have been addressed by posting of the links into that process. But one of the questions is about the co-production, and I think people have recognised the importance of Christine's role in the research and things. So could you just talk a little bit, perhaps Yasmin and anyone else, about the way that the work of the Housing Dementia Working Group involving people living with dementia in its work?
Sorry, that's on me. Okay, so some of the things that we're doing with the items that we've launched this week is that we will be piloting those planners in next year with people with dementia and their families and carers. Obviously, a lot of the things, so the 2-pager and recommendation 34 and the Padlet are still in their early stages. So we're looking for comments and feedback on how we can improve and edit those. So that's how we'll be including people with dementia and their families and carers in the piloting of those 2 pieces of work. Wendy, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
I was just going to say that as part of the Dementia Housing Working Group, we also have people like Ruth Ely that join us. So she brings along, obviously, views from her organisation, and she goes back and speaks to lots of people living with dementia about things that we are developing. Yeah, nothing really on top of what Yasmin said, just that what we really, really want is for people to get the Padlet link out there. And, at Guinness, we're going to be putting it on our website for our customers and actually kind of monitoring those comments and that feedback to see if people do find it useful. Like I think I said in the answer, we actually found the idea from a health trust. And it just looked like a really good kind of virtual pinboard to be able to use. But like anything, it's the views of a few, and then we have to kind of pilot it and see what we did. And I know certainly that kind of was the way we did our project at Guinness about becoming more dementia friendly. It was working with people living with dementia, and actually there's not one thing that people want. There's lots of different things. So, and people want things delivered in different ways, just as we all do. So I think it is really important to kind of make sure that we can get it out there as much as possible with the help of everybody that's kind of on this webinar and anyone that's got any networks that they could share it with.
Jeremy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, if I may. I mean, one of the things that was set out in the report was how both the research and the practice can work much more closely together. And I think what we've found since is that both the Dementia and Housing Working Group and the Housing and Research Dementia Consortia, the Housing and Dementia Research Consortia, have really been effective in trying to look both operationally where we can sort of test out ways of supporting people who have a better quality of life living with dementia and how operators respond to that, but also what are the challenges, whether it's around design technology, and the leaflet was launched this week, or indeed some other work that's being done behind the scenes, which is about creating more board champions. And I think Chris and others talked about that. So there will be some other work coming out, which is about how both at a board level and at an executive level, that there is ownership around being dementia ready, and some examples of what Chris shared about what Housing 21 but also others such as McCarthy and Stone, and you know, so it's not just the social housing sector, it's all the independent and the private sector are starting really to address this, which is encouraging.
So that's it's not in the questions that have been posted, but if it's a question that troubles me, and it links to Lord Best's initial comments, is how organisations are embracing this as practitioners to think about the dementia challenge that we face, and to some extent, you know, some great resources and some great actions that follow up from the inquiry, APPG's inquiries report, and the great links. But that is to preaching to almost the passionate already, and I wonder whether, Lord Best, you've got any ideas about how we can permeate this wider than just the specialists and the people who are linked to this call, but also perhaps having come to Wendy as well, because I think Guinness was one of the pioneers of a general housing provider who recognised this wasn't just about your specialist dementia services. This crossed everyone in all forms of housing. So Lord Best first, and then perhaps Wendy.
Well, I think that networking amongst the organisations on the front line is really good, because, you know, who do you learn from really? You don't actually learn from reading a report. But if people like Wendy at Guinness, they say, look, this is what we're doing, and this is what happened. This was a disaster. We're never going to do that again. But this way of doing things really works. That's actually how you best learn. And the HousingLIN presents those opportunities for people to learn from each other, because we're in a learning curve, aren't we? Then spreading it out to the politicians, you know, they're distracted, as we all know, by almost everything else. Getting through to them, it's a painful business, but one can gradually, incrementally get people on side. I think government is now less keen on moving their ministers every 6 months and every 9 months. You know, we've had this ridiculous turnover of ministers. They're just beginning to understand what you're talking about, and they move on. We've now had Chris Pincher for 2.5 years. This is you're going to break some records soon on the housing side. But once, you know, if people stay for a bit, they begin to pick up on this, particularly if we can get them out and seeing people and meeting people, get them out, those openings, any opportunity you can to get your local MP round. They're looking for votes probably, but get them around anyway, and then they learn and understand better what we're talking about. So it's a slow old process, but some not so discouraging signs around.
That's a positive look at it, Richard. Wendy, you want to come in?
Yeah, I was going to say, as you said, we are primarily a general needs housing organisation, and actually a large number of our customers living with dementia don't live in our housing for older person schemes. So it was about actually, you know, raising awareness within our workforce, making sure that communities are more dementia aware, and that what we can offer is tailored to what the customers need. So what we also did with Housing 21 is we held a couple of housing rising to the dementia challenge events, where we actually invited along primarily general needs housing providers to come along and hear about Guinness's journey and that of Housing in Care 21. And obviously what I was saying there is we did it as a project, but actually the kind of learning from it is that it was some really simple changes, and just talking and listening to your customers that are living with dementia and their families can help shape and tailor kind of better customer service all round, really. So I think that sometimes the other providers just needed to hear that it isn't something that you need to throw lots of money or lots of resource at. It is just about being more aware, making sure that your workforce are well trained, and making sure that you're listening to your customers. And, you know, and I will continue to share the kind of evaluation report and any findings that we have and we continue to have going forward with sort of other practitioners, because it is so easy to be more dementia friendly and to be more dementia aware. And I think that that's what we need to kind of be sharing with everyone, really.
Thank you, Wendy. And that does sort of answer a question that's been posed by Emily about sort of helping people live well at home, regardless of their circumstances. Dementia, disability, other characteristics are all part of that equation in all forms of housing, not just in specialist types of housing provision. We have now been joined fantastically by Jane and Jack. So I pause the panel discussion and allow you to just talk about the report you've just launched. I know you're launching it this morning, so thank you for joining us on the back of that. So I don't know who's going to speak first, either it's Jane or Jack.
Hello, everyone. Brilliant. You got the report. Jane, I'll hand over to you.
Hi, morning, everyone. So yeah, we are literally knee sliding in from our Greater Manchester launch this morning that has just finished, launching the report on live today. We will pop a link to it. I think Jeremy has got a link to a web page which has the full report. So today, Jack and I are launching the Housing and Living Well with Dementia from policy to practice in Greater Manchester. Jack is my colleague here from Dementia United and also the housing sector in the GM Health and Social Care Partnership, and I'm Jane McDermott from the Healthy Ageing Research Group at the University of Manchester. So Jack and I are just really delighted to manage to be able to join today all the colleagues and the session for HousingLIN, certainly as part of the Festival of Ideas. So we're actually going to briefly give you a quick overview of our report, which is being launched. It presents evidence to inform the provision of innovative and inclusive housing from across Greater Manchester for those living with dementia, carers, loved ones, neighbourhoods and communities, all around the focus of meaning of home. It delivers a regional mobilisation, is what we think is a response to a number of strategic drivers, including all the work from HousingLIN, Happy, Tappy Toolkits, but also the Greater Manchester Framework for creating age-friendly housing, which you're actually going to be listening here about later today as part of the HousingLIN programme with our colleague Nicola Waterworth, who's talking about that this afternoon. It also focuses and highlights housing innovation and the integration through population health and social care, and links across to the Greater Manchester Independent Inequalities Commission. It includes a series of recommendations from policy to practice, but also nationally it highlights the fundamental importance of fit-for-purpose housing and its critical role within the integrated care planning, housing strategy and provision, levelling up agendas, local, regional, combined authorities, but most importantly for civil society across 7 priority areas. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background as to how this happened. And I think a lot of this you will know about and you'll be very familiar with, because it kind of started with the APPG call for evidence. If you just go to the next slide, please. But I'm just going to give you some framework in terms of what we were doing in Greater Manchester simultaneously. So looking back, so that you will know the call came out from the Older People in Housing for evidence specifically focusing on housing for people living with dementia. So a submission was produced by the GM housing providers, which included contributions from a broad range of stakeholders, such as social housing providers themselves, but also architects, ageing specialists, as well as developers. Following this submission and simultaneously to it, Greater Manchester colleagues commenced to inform and build a real understanding of the key issues affecting people living with dementia, carers and loved ones through lived experience groups. These deep dive sessions included the Greater Manchester Dementia Carers Expert Reference Group, and we've heard from Kim just now. She was a great contribution about her lived experience of caring for her parents, as well as experts by experience within the housing sector, including frontline housing association staff such as operational managers, neighbourhood officers and maintenance workers. The content of all of these consultations was framed around our evidence submission, which highlighted the importance of health, home and community. All learning from these sessions have then fed into strategic architecture of Greater Manchester, and this is around the Dementia United Strategic Board, the Health and Social Care Partnership, but also the Housing Planning and Ageing Group, which I think, Jeremy, you're a member of as well. As we moved into 2021, the University of Manchester, who I'm representing today, specifically myself, but also Dr. Bernadette Bartlam, under the guidance of Professor Alistair Burns, who is a leading professor within the area of brain health and old age mental health, joined the project to deliver an evidence review and to support some of the further engagement activity. So we specifically started to broaden some of the scope in the consultations to look at the health and social care practitioners as well, and understand those experts by experience from GPs and nurses. The report findings were drafted across 7 themes, and recommendations during the summer, throughout this summer, have then been sense checked and deeply socialised with lots of different stakeholders involved who I've just mentioned. Aligned to this work, you'll know that there's been a number of complementary publications, one from the APPG, Housing Live Well Dementia, Are We Ready?, which is part of today's session, I'm sure. Added to this, the Manchester LGBT Plus Foundation also produced a report earlier this year on housing, ageing and care, and all of which maps against the GM framework for creating age-friendly homes. This work directly dovetails into. So there's a quick whistle-stop tour even of where we came to land on this report that we're launching today. I'm now going to pass over to Jack, who's going to give an overview of the key findings from the consultations, but also the recommendations and the next steps of where we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. If we could have the next slide, please, that would be great, Sally. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think one of the key takeaways from the report, and at the risk of preaching to the converted, is about housing as being a fundamental aspect of mental health and well-being, but also recognising that housing in Greater Manchester in the UK is also a symbol and a key component of the inequalities in our society. One of the key messages of the report is that as Greater Manchester becomes more and more diverse, we need much more diverse options for people, as they get older, and if people get diagnosed with dementia. It's a rights-based approach, focusing on people's assets, with looking to answer a real large call throughout a lot of the stakeholder interviews. 250 people across housing, health and social care sectors in Greater Manchester. Fundamental call for supporting people to live independently in their homes and communities that they know and love for as long as possible. Some of the key issues, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar of, as we're moving we're moving through the pandemic and into integrated care systems in terms of the NHS context. Some of the key things is about commissioning that must be collaborative, joined up to take advantage of market shaping opportunities, building on community mobilisation, including VCSE, mutual aid and housing support groups. It was one of the shining lights of the pandemic, how voluntary organisations could deliver support for people, often with social housing colleagues, community outreach teams, in a much more fluid and dynamic way than statutory sectors could. Also looking at decommissioning housing, which doesn't support independence. A lot of the investment in social homes in the 80s and 90s, which it might need some adaptation or decommissioning, to reinvest in mainstream options which place an emphasis on independent living. Carers being fundamental to all of this. All of these options, we're not just talking about people living with dementia, but loved ones, carers. They're an essential part of the conversation, and in this work they've been a guiding light in driving us through to the recommendations. And also investing in the enablers that help people to live independently for longer. I know that the APPG and a number of other reports have highlighted the advent of digital technology over the past 10 years in particular, that we can do fundamentally different things to support people and to carry forward their wishes to live independently. And I think it's recognising this changing landscape and taking advantage of it. Those are some of the key issues. Obviously, the report goes into much more detail about those, but if we could move forward to the next slide, I'll give you an idea of the recommendations. 7 recommendations across a diverse array of factors, as I've already said before, but 3 main elements. So the most important thing in all of these is that none of them can really work in isolation. They have to be integrated together. And I think that that's a big challenge for Greater Manchester and for elsewhere in the country. It's about communication almost. People are patients, they're tenants, they're loved ones as well. And I think that there's that lack of synchronicity sometimes when we're trying to think about how we can work across systems, across silos. housing with care, accessible guidance and information, so financial information on adaptations, options locally, so it's not a bifurcated choice between a care home and living in an increasingly unsuitable mainstream housing option. Integrated pathways, so hospital discharge teams, social care assessors, occupational therapists, understanding housing, the benefit system, disabled facilities grants as a fundamental aspect of people's care. Adult social care white paper earlier in the week just talking about every decision about care being a decision about housing. Lots on planning and development, particularly focusing on minority communities in Greater Manchester and realising a range of different options. You get an element of that if you look at the animation. And building a community of practice. I think one of the great things about this work is that we've worked really closely with the university. We've also, spoken to a number of national colleagues. Jeremy and colleagues at HousingLIN have been fantastic as well in sense checking some of the reports and obviously building on the APPG findings. We want to continue this. If we move forward to the next slide. We're offering a pretty simple way of how we expect to turn this from policy to practice. So if we just move to the next slide, I can just show you. So looking forward, you might need to just press it a long one. As I came in at the last presentation, and Wendy, as you mentioned, all this stuff about dementia readiness is eminently doable. We're offering a framework of action based around the several recommendations. We're going to be having workshops driven by lived experience, ambitious, inclusive dialogue, which actually leads to very practical actions, building into the wider work around age-friendly homes, engaging with the sector as a collective in terms of capital on really innovative schemes. All of this stuff, again, is eminently doable, and I think that we're in a fantastic position now to push forward. But having that community of practice, having that political leadership, and having the voice of people with lived experience is something that we hope will lead to more progress in the coming years, with such a range of evidence that we've put at the disposal of policymakers and decision makers in Greater Manchester. That's the report in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Jane and Jack. That's brilliant, and it actually resonates with a lot of what we've been talking about already before you joined us. Because I think housing is clearly fundamental and at the heart of any response to dementia. And the adage that any decision about health is a decision about housing, it resonates with stuff we've talked about already. And really, the range of housing. It's not just the housing with care; it's all forms of housing. And if you're well housed, then so much else opens up all those opportunities. I think the second theme about planning ahead and creating opportunities is also really resonates with the comments that Lord Best made at the outset in terms of making sure it's at the forefront of our minds, not buried in as something we're trying to deny as an issue. And then the third one is about the inclusivity and community. I think they're really great themes, and there's another great report to add to the wealth of evidence that we're building around these issues. If I can, I'd like to go back as the panel to one of the questions which has been promoted most, which I think is Becky made in her presentation, the comments about segregation, and it sort of seems to run against the issue of the inclusivity, but whether dementia wings are still things we should be considering. And the question says in 2022, should we tolerate segregation on the basis of one characteristic, be it dementia, learning disability, or other single dimension of diversity? So, Becky, I don't know if you want to just contextualise that, because clearly there have been in the past dementia wings as a form of model, and if you've got any findings on that, and then I'll perhaps go to the rest of the panel to sort of comment on this as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's an interesting question, and certainly at first sight, it doesn't sound like something in 2022 that we ought to be aiming for. I think though, just from a research perspective, I know that Housing 21 did their own in-house research around dementia wings that led to getting rid of them because they were kind of a focus for stigma, and we're not seeing positive at all. But what we know as a researcher is that they do still exist. That people are living in them, and that some people are choosing to live in them even. So I think what we need to find out is actually Are there advantages to them? Are there challenges to them? What are these? So that we know what works. I think that's the thing, is we don't have any findings yet. Our case studies will start next year. But I suppose playing slightly devil's advocate to that question is, it's about providing choices for people always. One model is not going to fit everyone. Actually, some people do prefer to be in a scheme, an activity, house, whatever it is, that's specifically for people with dementia. So I think sometimes there is this idea that inclusion is about having something that everyone fits into, but actually sometimes to be inclusive, you have to offer opportunities to be exclusive. So we will find out, and I suppose watch this space to see whether segregation in 2022 is something that some people like or not.
So I think it's an ongoing discussion about specialist provision and dedicated provision and the next to that. I don't know if Chris, you want to come in and talk about this as well?
Yeah, so Becky sitting on the fence, which I completely agree, understand. I slightly won't, I don't think, because we do have them, we have seen them, and we've seen them in Housing 21 when we have specific wings. But it doesn't kind of work for me in that you have, do you move people out of the main scheme and you put them in the wing because they're starting to live with dementia? We don't always know that everyone is living with dementia, and I think there's different stages of living with dementia as well, which we all know. So at what point do they move into that specific area of the building? So I think when you look at it in its entirety, I don't think you can segregate on that basis, because I think, Bruce, you said it, when you see one person living with dementia, you see one person living with dementia, not everybody else, and there's different, and it can come in different formats and different things. So I don't think you can label it and put it in a wing, and we did the research and it suggested that. But Becky, I'm with you. I think it's choice is really important as well, but for me, I think it's a little bit old-fashioned perhaps.
Jane, I could see you nodding with some of the comments that were made. I don't know if you've got a perspective on this. You've got a wealth of experience in this field. So,
I mean, I think for us, I suppose I'm just thinking back at what's happening in Greater Manchester, and I think actually it's just fundamentally about tailoring and choice and personalisation. Without wanting, we've been talking about personalisation for 15 years in Manchester and Greater Manchester, and I think we really need to remember that we're giving people the choice and options that should be available to them. I know we've not probably got time, but Jack's put a link in, and there's an animation that we've done which actually also highlights the LGBTQ community, and actually a special new housing offer, which is specifically for people who are from that community, because the request was, from a deeper dive conversation, was that the learning, what it told us in terms of research, is that people don't want to move into certain settings where they don't feel they can celebrate their identity and be who they really are. So I think it's really important. It's a very complex, and there's lots of nuances here, but actually for me, we shouldn't be segregating anybody, and actually we should be really moving towards inclusivity, tolerance, and actually understanding that we are all individuals wanting to live and work together. And we know what enables us to age well into later life, regardless of what condition we may have. It's actually being able to remain connected with our communities, to feel like we're having purpose, to actually contribute to life in lots of different ways, and to remain in our own homes or into wherever we call home that is best for us.
Thank you. Was there anyone else wanted to come in on that question? Other comments or thoughts?
Yeah, Bruce, just briefly. I mean, some of the work that we do in Greater Manchester that I'm involved in is about discharging people from hospital. Obviously, people who have been delayed on mental health inpatient wards for a long time. So it's an aspect of this specialised versus mainstream debate, is people who are looking to come out of hospital with complex dementia, but also comorbid mental health issues, which are very, very difficult to place. And I think that's an aspect where a more specialised housing offer might be necessary, because it's very, very difficult to find options with regards to risk elsewhere in the community. But it's not particularly the same mainstream versus specialised dementia wing thing, but it's an aspect of this question which we have to deal with as the NHS.
So I think it goes back to, I think Lord Best may come in this, because I think his earlier comment was we're developing so few housing for older people and other elements there that effectively we're limiting the amount of choice and the range of options that are available, because there isn't one model that works for everybody. I think that's very clear, but I think it's a symptom of lack of volume. Is that true, Richard?
Absolutely. We just need loads more before we start getting terribly fussy about dividing people into smaller and smaller groups. But just, you will remember, Bruce, at Hanover, I used to chair Hanover. Bruce used to be chief executive of Hanover. It's now Anchor Hanover. No comment. But that organisation tried in Barking and Dagenham in East London an extra care scheme exclusively for people with dementia. That was about 42 flats, something like that. You know, a relatively small extra care scheme. This did not work. The referrals from the local authority of people with dementia were people with very serious dementia, because, you know, you can cope in your own home pretty far down the line, and you're only going to take that big plunge and move out into extra care if you are, you know, if this is getting really quite serious. And the people that then occupied that extra care scheme for those living with dementia, they were all, you know, with serious dementia issues. And that really was at the level of residential care. And we weren't geared up, and we weren't catering as an extra care scheme for full residential care facility opportunities. It didn't work. And we reverted with that Hanover scheme to having a proper mix of people who had physical needs and companionship needs and all the rest. And we, you know, there's a nice extra care scheme there now, no doubt now, but it didn't work to segregate people in an extra care scheme exclusively for those with dementia. And I think that's one, lots of choice, yes, but that's one choice, perhaps a step too far.
And I think that touches on the issue that it's housing and people's homes, and that can come in many forms. But once you take it away from being a home for a person with their own boundaries and their own autonomy, that creates a very different dynamic. And I think that's where it was becoming in that particular example that you talked about, Richard. We've got another question, which is very specific, which is about a particular design issues from Carla, and that's about sort of whether some of the disability design specifications in terms of you know, sliding doors and other elements are almost contrary to some of the design for dementia principles, and whether people have any experience of that. I think, you know, part of the great thing of the information sharing is that people can share different experiences, and not every design factor is going to be the same. I was struck for the inquiry. Wendy Mitchell was talking about how she'd adapted her kitchen and her home to put labels on pictures of what was inside each of the cupboards on them, so she knew what was there and things. So anyone got any comments about this sort of design issues? I don't know who I'm particularly looking at in terms of that, whether Jeremy, you're going to help me out on that one.
Yeah, Carla raised some really good points, and one of the things that's come through this week is about how we need to design inclusively, and for some people it will work and for other people it won't work. And what we did through the APPG report is try to refresh the 10 design principles there so that they're dementia ready as well. So everything from lighting and sound and acoustics played as equally important as spatial awareness as well. So I don't know if that specifically answers Carla's question, but the issues around design are very relevant, and the Dementia and Housing Working Group leaflet that's just been released this week also signposts to a number of sort of good practice examples and other examples of design friendliness. And again, some of the work that Manchester have done around spatially as well, working with your planning authority. And again, Jane and Jack, you may have some comments about how design plays an impact on planning as well, which is another useful sort of avenue to explore.
And I see Rita's added a question as well, a comment as well, about the challenge for dementia is that every person with dementia is different, so the challenge of designing individually. And I think that is a real common principle that actually, and the inquiry also picked out that in sense of starting with the person, starting with their own experiences, starting with their own circumstances, rather than trying to impose a fixed solution onto an individual in terms of that approach. I think there's a question that Diane's put in the questions about planning ahead and powers of attorney, and whether they're the cost of those and the priority, and seeing how they are picked up. But I think that perhaps widen that out to people's comments, which is more about the information and the access to advice and sources of support. I think that was again an issue that the inquiry raised, which is how people can find out more about it. Christine talked in her presentation about the D word and people almost whispering it, and that sense of raising the awareness and raising the profile of that. So Wendy, you've been obviously a champion of dementia awareness and dementia friendliness for some time. Have you got any thoughts on how we can stop it being a whispered D word and make it more acceptable to talk about dementia?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it is an everyday thing now. It is business as usual. We are encouraging our customers to talk to us about whether they're living with dementia, or we're encouraging our staff to be looking out for it and have the conversations early. So it's interesting about the point on power of attorney and cost and everything. If we can get arrangements in place as early as possible, we understand what our customers want, and if there's particular different ways that they want us to communicate with them or their loved ones, we just make sure that that's happening. So it shouldn't be such an issue later down the line. But I think when we certainly started the project, it was quite hard to find our customers that were living with dementia, because they didn't want to come forward to us as a housing organisation and tell us, because they were worried that we were going to want to take tenancy action or something and say, well, you shouldn't be living on your own if you've got dementia. So it was really kind of breaking down that stigma and saying to them, no, how can we help you stay in your home until such time as you choose that you don't want to anymore, or you want to try a different type of housing. So I think it's just kind of getting the message out there that actually we want to hear from those customers and we want to help and support, and there is to be no stigma about it. I mean, I know that there is. I just find it really hard to swallow still, that people would say, well, I don't want to let you know, or we whisper about it. I think that's where the Dementia Friends awareness sessions are just brilliant, because actually when you do them, you do look at things quite differently.
Chris, do you want to come back on that?
If I can, I agree with Wendy, and I think it goes a little bit wider as well in terms of engaging with family and friends, and we've started to do that and started to talk to family and friends of residents in our schemes, not particularly that may be living with dementia, but just to raise awareness more widely, and thinking about that. We're not diagnosing people living with dementia, but certainly if you can identify it early on, then all the things that you talk about there, Wendy, and the comments about power of attorney, you can get in place much quicker and start to have those conversations earlier. It becomes much more easier for the people, the residents and their family and friends. And I think that's something we've kind of been launching across the services, which is to have a conversation about what it means to live with dementia and start talking more and seeing it more through the lens of those people. And I think that's a bit of a switch, because you don't often do that. We do these things in isolation sometimes, but I think the more we can engage with the family, friends and relatives of people in the wider schemes and the general public, then I think it just reduces the stigma and starts to make it much more normal that yes, dementia is something that possibly will affect many of us, and that we should be talking about it openly and honestly. So yeah, I think more we can do, much more wider, I think is the way forward.
And I think it was really taking Jane and Jack's, your report, explicitly made the point about carers as well as people living with dementia. And I think that's a really important factor, to have that wider and more inclusive discussion, and the community that they're in is a key component to that. And I also hope that the information sharing that we've talked about will also help in that terms of, more people be able to engage with the debate and the discussion. I am conscious that we've just hit our time limit, and so I don't want to sort of carry it on, to keep that. But a great resource in terms of the comments that have been posted here, and lots and lots of really useful links. And a great new report, obviously from Manchester, but great work from building on, I think, the great foundations that the APPG report provided, and it clearly, Richard, has provided a spur to action within the space of a year. So a really influential report, and you know, thank you for being such a champion in that process. So I'll hand back over to Jeremy for any closing thoughts, but thank you very much to all the panelists for being so fantastic today, making my job so easy. Thank you.
Well, and thanks for making it look so easy as well, Bruce. That's really fantastic. And can I echo your thanks? And I think Lord Best, you're in Manchester next week at some point, so you may also pick up on some of this. Anyway,
off for COVID, sadly, called off.
Oh, it's been called off. Oh, what a shame. I can understand that, but I know
Manchester anyway.
I know colleagues are very keen to engage with you with what's going on in Manchester. Jane mentioned a number of other things that are happening in Manchester, and I just want to share with you that we finish our summit this afternoon looking at issues around healthy homes and healthy living, making healthy communities, and a session chaired by Professor Judith Phillips, where we'll be joined by another parliamentarian, Lord Nigel Crisp, who some of you will know is the former Chief Executive of the NHS. So again, do join us. We'll be thinking about some of the other work that Manchester's also done around engaging with communities, around healthy neighbourhoods, and a number of other leading speakers. So please do join us at 3 o'clock for that. But just coming back to this morning's session, what a real powerful message about how we can all become dementia ready, whether it's within the housing sector, whether it's through strategic partnerships and within local economies. And listening to the voice of Christine, I thought Chris was really inspiring as well. So thanks for sharing that. All it leaves me to say is thanks very much to all our presenters for giving up their time this morning. Thanks for some great questions in the chat box. Can I thank Bruce for chairing and Housing 21 for your support? And personally, can I also just thank Sally and Jerome behind the scenes for making this session possible and keeping us all on track. So I look forward to catching up with you hopefully later, and also asking, has anybody attended all 11 sessions? There may be one or two you have. I look forward to hearing from you. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.